think she's an amazing woman. I mean, if you think what she has seen in her lifetime and what she's dealt with nationally, globally, family, and she's kept a level head. And she's 96 years old and has been going strong till now. That's impressive.
Yeah, for sure. Anderson, I just have to tell you before we wrap up here that I've lived in this country for a couple of years now, and the thing that I found very odd is that there really is no sort of national day for the Union. Of course, there's national days for Scotland and England and Northern Ireland and Wales, but people often don't celebrate, especially the English one. But what really brings people together in this country is the Queen and the monarchy. Obviously, not everyone is a fan, but by and large, suddenly when you have something like the Platinum Jubilee, people are proud to wave the flag. People are very proud to be British, something that's uniting that not a lot of other things really do in this country.
Interesting. Scott McLean, appreciate it. We'll check in with you again. We could get news on the Queen at any time. Stay right here. We're going to take a quick break. More ahead.
This is CNN Breaking News.
I want to go straight to London. I want to bring in CNN royal correspondent Max Foster outside Buckingham Palace. Max, what are you learning?
The Queen has died, very sadly. She died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and Queen Consort were referenced there to Charles. He automatically becomes King, will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. I'm just going to look at another email I just received, if there's any extra there. No, the Queen has died, and long live the King. I'm not going to call him King Charles because we don't know what his name will be, but all we know is the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon, which is horrific news for the nation, and I can only imagine how people feel watching this. You'll see that the flag over Buckingham Palace has been lowered to symbolise the Queen's death. I don't know quite what to say. I mean, this was the news we were dreading, but obviously what happened this afternoon was the Queen died and the family were informed and they headed up to Balmoral and they are there to pay their respects. There's a very clear process that follows. Now we would expect to hear from the King tonight in a televised address, and you'll start hearing bells tolling across London and indeed the nation, and flags lowered like this will be reflected at public buildings across the United Kingdom. And we now have a very clear process of about 10 days leading up to a funeral, but I don't want to give too much detail about the plans that I've seen because they do need to be signed off by the King to be formalised, but we'll be hearing more details about that, I'm sure, as the evening progresses. But Queen Elizabeth has died at the age of 96, which is a horrific moment for the UK, but also 14 other nations around the world, and indeed other nations where she wasn't head of state, who revered her as the longest serving, and I'd say most revered head of state until she died this afternoon.
Max, let me just ask you, just personally, you have followed this family through much of your career. You're a royals correspondent. You have watched the Queen in good times and in bad times. What are your thoughts about her in this moment, about her reign, about her life, about her legacy?
I think what she did was extraordinary. She came to the throne in her 20s with a crumbling empire and many people talking about the death of the monarchy. And somehow she turned that into one of the most successful, arguably the most successful monarchy that Britain has ever seen. She reigned over a tumultuous period of British history, the media revolution, a loss of reverence in society. She's someone that we can't actually relate to because of the kind of life that she lived, but someone who we did ultimately learn to relate to because of the way she managed her monarchy. She remained relevant by embracing the media, by connecting with us, by speaking to us, by bringing in television cameras and showing her meeting other people. They're very simple little gestures, but things that made her relevant to us and made her relatable. She also was there in times of grief. Any national moment, we would look to her and she would be there for us. We would see her at regular events over the course of the year, so she tiptoed through our lives and she was always there. I think what is going to be very difficult is for us not to see her in our ultimate moment of grief, which is her dying. And we will now look to the King. We'll wait to hear whether or not the King keeps the name Charles, whether he's King Charles or he chooses another name. We will get details on that when a placard is put up there on the forecourt at Buckingham Palace, where he will, the formal announcement will be made and there'll be a reference to his name. We know that Camilla is now the Queen Consort, so she is Queen Camilla. Prince William is now the Duke of Cornwall. He will inevitably become the Prince of Wales because that's a title that will come to him, and he takes over the Duchy of Cornwall, and now Prince George is second in line to the throne. So this is a huge moment in British history and Commonwealth history, and I think for the world, because I think she transcended actually monarchy, and I think she was a truly global figure, and one who has a guaranteed place in the history books. And I'm now looking down at those people gathering outside the palace gates, and I think those numbers will escalate and it will be a very emotional scene as this news sets in.
Christiane?
It is very extraordinary to hear Max describe what's happened and keep using the word King Charles, the new king, because for 70 years this country and the world has only known a queen, Queen Elizabeth. She was one of only a very few female monarchs of this kingdom, and incredibly successful, along with Queen Victoria, along with Queen Elizabeth I, and it's very difficult to know where the country will go in terms of its relationship with the monarchy, and it's probably too early even to talk about this now, but we are in a state of crisis here in the United Kingdom, like around the rest of the world, prompted by the war in Ukraine and by many other issues: food poverty, energy poverty, inflation, strikes, people's unrest, not to mention climate, which she was very, by the way, devoted to, along with her fellow 96-year-old David Attenborough, who's a world-known figure as well. And that was, when we talk about how she never really did any interviews, she kind of did a quasi-interview with him, celebrating, I think, their 95th birthdays or something, some such event. And it was just amazing to see how she was, in her own way, really on the curve of important issues like the climate. Her late husband, Prince Philip, was very much on that issue as well. I think we saw the Queen decline in terms of morale and health when her husband, Prince Philip, died. We were both here reporting on his funeral. It was the last time we saw the Queen really out in public. Yes, we did on her Jubilee, but that was in the middle of COVID. She was all on her own, and I remember people speculating then about how she might continue her life without the man who was her life partner, not just personally but also professionally. And she did decline quite significantly after that with COVID. She had a bout of COVID with this euphemistically phrased mobility problems, which, she was 96 years old. Yeah, she had some trouble walking, but she was so often viewed standing, even in the last months, even in the last couple of days, as we pored over that last picture of her. greeting her latest and her last Prime Minister, Liz Truss, the 15th Prime Minister of this country. We've heard from former Prime Ministers just before this announcement was made, Tony Blair, David Cameron from different parties, wishing her and the family well, concerned about the news that was coming out in the past several hours. And as we've said, we know that President Biden, he's, I believe, the 14th or so president that she has known. She first knew President Truman and all the other US presidents. And yes, she's been the head of the Commonwealth. She's been surrounded by world leaders throughout the last 70 years and has given a message, I guess, of continuity. I guess that's it, continuity and stability in a very, very turbulent world, particularly throughout her reign.
Bianca Nobila, it's so interesting to hear Christiane talk about Britain being at a crisis right now in terms of the economy, gas prices, and the like. This is Queen Elizabeth II oversaw and was a steadying force through so many crises over the last 70 years of her reign. There is no telling now how the king, what his reign will be like, and what impact that will have. They're posting right now the statement of her death on the gates of Buckingham Palace. The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon, the statement said. The King and Queen consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and return to London tomorrow, Thursday, 8th September 2022. That is the tradition, posting the statement on the gates of Buckingham Palace. Just watch.
Whoa.
Bianca,
That's it. That's
the person at the helm through so many crises over the last 70 years is no longer there.
Oh yeah, it could be Windsor.
Is Anna Stewart there?
No, she is not. And she has been the through line, the continuity, a towering historical figure and living legend around the world and around the Commonwealth. Britain is not only on the verge of an economic crisis, but also an identity crisis. It's been buffeted, it's been challenged. To some extent, it's confused about its place in the world after Brexit. There's no longer peace on the European continent. It is a time of great flux and great uncertainty. And this is usually when the British public would look to the monarch. If you consider during the COVID-19 pandemic, she was referred to as the comforter-in-chief for the speeches that she gave to the nation, for the solace and the comfort that she provided. So this will be a moment of profound shock and grief, and I say this as I see the crowds swelling behind us outside the front of Buckingham Palace. And even, Anderson, on a personal level for me, I grew up in New Zealand where the Queen was also head of state. Then once I moved to England, she came to my primary school once or twice. I had the opportunity to meet her. She seems to have touched so many people's lives. Somehow, a woman with such a dedication to her civic duty that was unerring. As Christiane and Max have said, abdication was never in her vocabulary. She loved this role. It wasn't just her duty. And Britain has lost one of their true historical greats this afternoon.
And a real patriot.
Well, the ultimate patriot, someone that dedicated her life ultimately to work and made many sacrifices. I think what we're looking for now, I'd expect the Prime Minister to make the first statement. She will come out in Downing Street, I'm sure, any moment now, and try to sum up what is a legacy which is so transcending because it covered 70 years of reign where so much changed. And yeah, there you go, the podium's out. So the podium comes out in Downing Street for state addresses. So Liz Truss, I mean, how many days has she been in office?
Two, for heaven's sake.
I mean, this arguably could define her career when we were talking about energy prices doing the same earlier today.
And Max, honestly, for the grandeur of the Queen's life and the expectation all throughout this day, I'm really struck by the simplicity of the message that has been affixed to the gates of Balmoral. The official so-called letter that announces the Queen's death. It's just so utterly simple. No grand words, just the Queen died peacefully today, this afternoon, talking about the King and the Queen consort who will remain in Balmoral until tomorrow. That's it. That's it. That's the formal announcement.
I think, as Bianca noted, the crowds coming out there, that's going to be, the really emotional moment. And people are going to be really shocked about how they feel. I mean, we had it with Diana, but this is times 10, I would argue. We're waiting for Liz Truss to come out. I'm sure, I haven't seen the website, but I think you'll see the royal website turning black. You'll start hearing cannons being fired at royal palaces. You'll see flags at half-staff across the nation and across the Commonwealth. And I think there's just going to be a massive outpouring of grief. A big test, a huge test for Liz Truss to try to express the nation at a moment where most people probably can't even find words.
Yeah. Max, I want to go to Matthew Chance, who is standing by outside 10 Downing Street. And Matthew, we should point out, it is not just the nation. It is not just people in Great Britain that are watching. It is the world that is watching and noting and mourning the passing of Queen Elizabeth II.
That's right. And of course, Queen Elizabeth II isn't just the Queen of Britain. She's the Queen of 15 countries. And so this is a loss on an international scale. You can see there's been a flurry of activity here in Downing Street. We showed you the flags earlier, flying at full staff. They've now been lowered to half staff, which is that sort of early official recognition of the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. You can also see that there's a lectern that's been put out in front of the door of 10 Downing Street in preparation for the Prime Minister to step outside her official residence and office and to address the cameras and to address the nation and, of course, to address the world at this moment of loss. It's an incredible, feat that she has got to embark on. It would be for anybody, given that she has to be the sort of mourner in chief, if you like, for the nation, for the Commonwealth of Nations as well. And that would be difficult for, anyone to do. But when you consider that Liz Truss has only been in this job for 2 days, and she's not, I think it's fair to say, the best public performer, at least she hasn't sort of fitted into that yet and got fully, comfortable with it yet, it is going to be an enormous challenge for her. So it's going to be really interesting to hear what she has to say and how she says it as well. As I say, we don't know exactly when that door of number 10 Downing Street is going to open. I tried to get some timing on that a few moments ago from one of the Downing Street aides that was milling around outside here and setting up the lectern, but he said he didn't know.
Yeah.
But the expectation is it will happen sort of any moment now.
And Matthew, it was only on Tuesday that the British Prime Minister, the new British Prime Minister Liz Truss, met the Queen at Balmoral, and it's really the last photo that we have seen of the Queen.
It was, yes, and I've looked again at that photo very hard, and you can see that, the Queen's 96 years old, she was 96, and she looked very frail. In retrospect, looking back on it, you could see that she was not her old self. And obviously within days of that, a couple of days, 48 hours, she's passed, and so this was obviously a very serious condition. There have been enormous preparations that have been planned for the death of Queen Elizabeth, really since the 1960s. 3 times a year, committees meet, they decide what the funeral arrangements are going to be. The Queen has had her own input in how she would like to be sort of seen off. There's an enormous security operation that is going to be swinging into action right now. It's going to be one of the biggest security operations that London has ever seen, because the expectation is there will be vast crowds of people coming to the British capital. It's going to involve the police, the other security forces, the armed forces, transport, and all of those things working together for what will obviously be the funeral of the century for this country. And so that is now getting underway. The first step in that is going to be taking place already, and of course it has to unfold this plan. It's called Operation London Bridge, by the way. That was the code name that it's been given. And there was a special code phrase that it was said would be passed on to the Prime Minister when it was confirmed that the Queen was dead, and that was London Bridge is down. And so now obviously that has been passed on to the Prime Minister, and she's going to be coming out, as I say, in a couple of minutes. But concurrently with Operation London Bridge, the funeral arrangements for Queen Elizabeth II, Operation Springtide, which is the investiture, the coronation of a new monarch. Of course, it's going to be Charles. And so that also has to get underway as well. And so we're entering a period which is going to take some time in this country of enormous planning, minuscule planning, that is going to see these two enormous events for this nation and for the world sort of unfold in the way that Britain does these things usually very well and planned to the planned to the last centimetre. And so those very complex operations are now getting underway.
And as we continue to look at the images from London, from Windsor Castle, from Balmoral, you see the crowds gathering, increasing in size outside Buckingham Palace, the notice of the Queen's death placed in a frame on the gates at Buckingham Palace. I'm joined here in New York, Zane Asher, Julia Chatterley as well. A remarkable moment for the history of this family, for the history of Great Britain and the Commonwealth countries, and for us all witnessing the death of a monarch that most of us have lived our whole lives seeing from afar.
I have to say, there are few moments that will rival this one in my lifetime, just in terms of scale, than being here watching what I'm seeing on my screen, the death, essentially, of Queen Elizabeth II. We all remember where we were on 9/11, for example. And everybody watching this will remember where they were on the 8th of September 2022, 6:30 in the evening UK time, when it was announced that Queen Elizabeth II had died. This afternoon, all of us feared the worst. And of course, the worst did actually happen, just announced 20 minutes ago. This is a time of just deep, deep grieving and mourning for the entire British population.
I think I'm an inferior journalist to my other British colleagues. I'm deeply saddened. I'm heartbroken for the family. I'm heartbroken for the British people that feel strongly about the royal family. And of course, there are those on both sides. The irony here, and I think the Queen herself would also appreciate it, is she's perhaps the best person to tell everyone how to handle this situation, to act with grace and calm. And I guess I fancifully imagine she's now looking down on Charles and saying, to steal the phrase, keep calm and carry on, because that's what is and does need to happen here. But I don't think for us we should underplay the emotion of the moment, the gravity of the moment, the fact that, and we keep saying to it, for most of us, we do not know a world without Queen Elizabeth II in it, and we don't know what's coming, and we don't know what kind of King Charles will make, even if he's going to be King Charles III, because we've had two Charles before. So
and he has been preparing his whole life for this moment.
How do you prepare? And the fact that you step into a job that you've been prepared for your life, but at the same time you have the heartbreak of losing your mother. And I think, again, it goes back to what we were saying. There are children here that are in mourning, grandchildren, great-grandchildren that will hear the news as well. As much as this is public mourning now, and it will continue for days to come, it is also a family that's deeply grieving. I think for those that love the Queen, whether you're a royalist or otherwise, and I think there are many of us out there, and I admit I'm one of them, I think the saving grace in this moment, and I think Christiane said it best when she said about the 17 months that have passed since Queen Elizabeth lost her soulmate in Prince Philip, and actually I believe that they're united somewhere now, and I'm sure the first thing she says to him is, this 17 months was the longest of my life.
I want to go to Richard Quest, who is in Singapore at this hour watching events and covering them as well. Richard, your thoughts on this sad day?
Incredible sadness and upset. The Queen has been, Julia summed it up. I mean, look, I'm a monarchist. I supported the Queen, and she has been part of my life from the get-go. And therefore tonight, I mean, even saying King Charles, you know, we've joked about it sort of in the past, and people say King Charles, but now it's King Charles. And William is the next behind, and everything moves on. So incredible sadness for those of us who have lived in the UK, who have been part of the Queen's reign, and an element of what uncertainty of what comes next is clearly how it all machinates. At a time, Anderson, of great international tension. The Queen was rock solid. The Queen was always there. We used to have a saying, you know, what would the Queen say? What would the Queen do? Well, now we haven't got that, but we'll get on. We'll move on. But tonight, the way I feel at the moment, I can sum it up in one word: deep upset and sadness.
It is such a difficult role to step in for. I mean, she has defined this role for generations of people all around the world, and for Prince Charles, whatever King, if he takes the name King Charles or whatever name he takes, trying to figure out how you be a king in this modern age, in this modern Great Britain.
Right. Oh, look, you ask a lot of Brits and they'll say, well, perhaps Charles, it would have been nice if he just skipped Charles and went straight to William. But that's not the way monarchy works. You don't pick and choose your monarchs if you're going to follow the system. Charles doesn't have the charisma of William. He doesn't have but he has had a life of duty as well. And he has served the country loyally and with great dignity over many years, except, of course, for the years where, of course, his personal life created scandal. But he is steeped in the future. He was ahead of the game with environmental issues. He was ahead of the game on climate change. He's ahead of the game on a lot of thoughts that are now normal, he was suggesting years ago. So, King, there you have it. I was about to say Prince Charles. No, King Charles, and it's Prince William who will become the Prince of Wales. Now he has to rise to that occasion. I believe he's going to speak to the country or in a pre-recorded message at some point in the next few hours, to 24 hours. And then he will have the job of uniting the United Kingdom at a time when there are such great fears and unease. But I just can't, I mean, look, I'm going to London tonight, you know, obviously.